As we get started here on the next part of the program, you may or may not have noticed the multiple vendors that are out there pushing wares who are trying to scan your name tag for future spam. Okay, this event is about getting the right people to focus on the right problems so we can generate the right solutions. You are the right people. You were selected to come here, not so we could spam you, but so that we can talk about and engage and address the right issues. So thank you all for coming out here. But we could not do this alone. As our Association of Grads representative mentioned, we did have some sponsors that allowed us to do this because as government we can't necessarily do things at this level in this nice venue that you have here. Well, the venue we can because it's a government venue. But the idea is that you have a role, and if you want to know how you can contribute to this, and if you like an event like this, where they're not pushing you and selling something to you, then by all means come talk to me about it and come talk to several of us, because there are opportunities, because this is not the end of the discussion, this is the beginning of the discussion. So, now that we have everyone here in the room, let me get started with our next speaker, Mr. Dave WAJSGRAS. Dave is a president of Raytheon's Intelligence, Information, and Services business. They provide innovation support, engineering, intelligence, training, cybersecurity solutions to Homeland Security, space, civil aviation, transportation, counterproliferation, and counterterrorism markets. Of course, we are fortunate to have him with us today because under his leadership, IIS is a global leader in advanced cybersecurity solutions and a pioneer in the use of powerful analytical and to predict the next cyber attack, which if you guys are following our Twitter handles out there, it's CyCon US 16, but you may follow that there's a massive DDoS going on as we speak that Twitter is being affected by. Dave's commitment to cybersecurity is rooted in his decade-long career in finance. Over the years, he has worked with an impressive range of heavy hitters across industry, including Honeywell and Lear. Since taking the reins of IIS, he has worked to ensure that cyber is part of the system of services IIS supports, delivers, and maintains. Despite the ever-growing challenges associated with securing critical networks and systems, he's optimistic that we can harness the full range of technological advances and digital era has to offer, while confident in the security of the activities of cyberspace. We are excited to welcome here to discuss his vision on the future of cybersecurity and perspectives and how we can better be prepared for the cyber challenges on the horizon. But you know that's not enough. I asked for an interesting fact about him, and this is what he came up with. So how many golfers or hackers do we have out there? So he says he recently had a hole-in-one at Belmont. What hole? The 15th hole at Belmont. So here's what I ask of you. Is it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or Snapchat? Because if it's not on there, it didn't happen. So, sir, welcome to the stage.
Okay, thank you for that kind introduction, Colonel, and I'm thrilled to be here today amongst so many very, very impressive speakers. And I probably should have known this, but I didn't, that this was the inaugural event, the first of many to come, and I think it's very, very timely. We heard from some folks this morning about the threat environment, what's going on. They primarily focused on what's happening in the U.S. In my position today, I have an opportunity to travel around the world and meet with many government leaders. And I will tell you without a doubt that this is foremost on so many people's minds today The threat environment is growing. It's quite serious. And we sit here in the United States and we say, okay, well, we're pretty advanced and we have a lot of capabilities and we're making very, very good progress. And I believe that. It's still early stages, but I believe that. When I visit some of our closest allies around the world, it's a little unnerving to see where they are in their journey for cybersecurity. When I say they're 5, 10, 15 years behind us, I'm really not exaggerating. So, like the Colonel just said, I'm Dave WAJSGRAS, and I have the opportunity today to oversee Raytheon's intelligence, information, and services business. Prior to this role, I was the Chief Financial Officer at the company level. And in that role, I oversaw the risk management for the company. And I was just talking with General Alexander a few minutes ago, and I said as part of that role as CFO, we increasingly spent more and more time thinking about and managing the cybersecurity threat environment at the company level. I focused a lot on the numbers in this role because as CFO, we all focus on numbers as CFOs. But I think more importantly, it's really what's behind the numbers. So let me take a few minutes and talk about how all of this, the number side specifically, relates to the evolution of the internet and the scale of the cybersecurity challenges that we're facing today. It's stating the obvious, but the nature of the internet, the folks that use it and the folks that abuse it have evolved significantly over the last 15 to 20 years or so. It's created a lot of opportunities and imperatives. Cybersecurity covers the broadest range of technologies, encompasses cultural change and even global governance. In the 1970s, for those of us that were around in the 1970s, this is not going to be a history lesson, just a very, very short reflection. In the 70s, the predecessor to the World Wide Web was primarily a tool for universities and labs to collaborate on research. Back then, emails and bulletin boards were all there was. Access and online resources grew in the 80s and 90s, and individuals, businesses, and governments started to see opportunities, and so did the hackers. Compared with today, the tech community of 30 years ago spent very little time, if any, actually thinking about the threats and how to defend against these threats. The internet was not built to defend against bad actors, and it's really not hard to understand why. When the first Internet Index was created in 1990, there were less than 1,000 websites in existence. And when Amazon.com was launched nearly 5 years later, it was actually launched on July 5th, 1994, the number of people with access to the web was still less than 1% of the world's population. Over time, more people gained access, the world got engaged, and the internet became what it is today, a social powerhouse, connecting people real time, empowering political movements, and spawning this concept that we now term big data. Today, there are more than 200 million websites with over 1 trillion unique URLs and over 4 million Apple and Android apps. Just under 3.5 billion people around the world are now directly connected to the internet, and that's about half the world's population. But this is even more interesting. There are more than 6.5 billion devices connected to the internet today, and that could be as many as 200 billion in just 8 to 10 years from now. So why all of these numbers? Because they do tell us an important story. They tell us about the way we use the internet, who uses the internet, and what's connected to the internet. And it's completely different today than it was 20 years ago. So now let me get back on the risk environment. When managing risk, we need to understand the motivations of the stakeholders. Today, there's a lot of areas we're trying to secure on the internet, and we're still using traditional, in many areas, we're still using a traditional IT security mindset based on different people, very different behaviors, and a different means of connectivity. To more directly confront the challenges we face in cyberspace, we have to address what I think is a very significant but often overlooked obstacle, and that's this generation gap. We all know that millennials are the first generation to have grown up with the internet all around them. And it is really fair to call these folks digital natives. They experience and relate to the online environment very differently than I do, and I'm sure many of you. They've never had a life that was fully offline. So I have 3 children, all under the age of 30, and the way they bounce around on the internet is a lot different than the way I think about the internet when I'm online. They're just very, very comfortable, and they really don't think about what can actually happen and what are the second and third order consequences of some of these things that they're doing. And I will tell you, it's not just my family. This is a broader millennial challenge. So over the past few years, my company has funded a series of studies to examine the issue and provide us real data. The 2013 joint study by Raytheon and the National Cybersecurity Alliance found that 23% of millennials shared an online password with a non-family member. In 2014, 72% had connected to an unsecured public Wi-Fi hotspot, and 52% had plugged in a USB device given to them by someone else. Millennials, and this is not every millennial, so I'm generalizing, but millennials, by and large, don't always see the threat the way, let's call it, the more advanced generation does. The survey also found that the number of young adults who said they've heard of a cyber attack within the last year nearly doubled, from 36% in 2015 to nearly 64% in 2016. So that's good news, but that also says that 36% of these folks still didn't know that cyber attacks were a natural part of their world. On the other side of the equation are the people who've been working for, say, over the last 5, 10, 20 years or so to develop cybersecurity solutions. And I'd suggest that, again, in general, that we have a different view of the online world than the digital natives. But what we all need to understand is that we're living in a world where cyber has created a convergence of our public and private lives, and the Colonel sort of alluded to that in his introductory remarks. So let's talk about today's threat environment. Most cybersecurity threat actors fall into one of 4 broad categories that continue to merge and evolve. In one category, we have the run-of-the-mill criminals. These folks range from the mildly skilled, or the script kiddies, all the way to the fairly sophisticated who breach systems, steal information, and monetize it. At the highest end of this category, we have organized cybercrime. These people are operating from cubicle farms and actually supported by outsourced help desks. They keep regular office hours and schedule attacks on networks around their own vacations. By some estimates, they now generate more than 80% of all cybercrimes. Hacktivists are the next group. They break into computer systems for politically and socially motivated reasons. Just in the past 18 months, we've seen multiple events to illustrate the point. In the DNC attack, which was discussed a little earlier today, for example, we have people motivated by a clear desire to affect the outcome of the U.S. presidential election. It's also interesting and important to note that there was an apparent use of organized crime to carry out the attack. So it might not be that they're hacktivists at all, but a nation state. It's been common in recent years for nation states to manipulate hacktivists to do their work or to hire organized crime in an effort to misdirect attribution. And these nation-state threat actors are perhaps the most challenging group we encounter from a technical perspective. Unlike the bad guys in the other categories, nation-state hackers are extremely well resourced and financed, and they're extremely talented. They have a multitude of motivations from traditional strategic and tactical intelligence to industrial espionage. What's changed in recent years is both the number of nation-states and the hardcore capability that they do have. And I mentioned a moment ago their use of non-state actors to achieve their goals. Our public policy tools have not kept pace with this shift. The fourth group is one of the Internet's newest innovations, if that's what we want to term it, and that's cyber terrorists or cyber terrorism. They've learned to use the Internet to do everything from disseminating propaganda and communicating securely to actual recruiting and obtaining assistance with operational planning. They started a few years ago with social media hijacking, website defacements, and distributed denial of service attacks. Today, they're using cyberspace to fuel extremist movements, to drive civil unrest, and I think most of us are aware of this, and to even overthrow some regimes. They simply view this domain as an extension of the battlefield. So let me change gears here for a moment and talk about the structure of the Internet. Many people here already understand that we've moved from information sharing on local servers to processing data in the cloud, hosted by others and fed by fixed and mobile devices. The concept of network integrity or segregation has been, by and large, eroded, whether you're an individual, a family, a government, or even a nation. Consolidation and intermingling of cyber activities across sectors has moved us away from the traditional framework of compartmentalized networks to networks that overlap, merge, and in some cases are completely indistinguishable from one another. They've converged. Building and maintaining resilience in a converged cyber environment requires us to look at cybersecurity from all of its domains across technical and social bounds. So what is the risk management imperative here? The tech landscape has changed, the userscape has changed, and the threatscape has changed. The cybersecurity industry must change if we intend to manage effectively in this new world of risk. This is a formidable challenge and an exciting challenge. And I know that we're up to this challenge. We have to keep in mind, again, I said it earlier, cybersecurity is not IT security. It's not a discipline that operates on its own in the basements of our organizations. And this is one of the reasons why I've been pushing our company to participate in a wider view of cyberspace. Today, we focus on our traditional customers, federal agencies, the military, and the intel community. And importantly, we also focus on critical infrastructure providers, commercial entities, and individuals. As a defense contractor, we have an additional imperative, and that's to provide our government customers with the capabilities necessary to respond with dominance in cyber warfare. These government customers simply view cyber warfare and cybersecurity as two sides of the same coin. The defense industry does have a proud history of developing groundbreaking technologies in many areas. Advances in science have always helped meet the powerful challenges of national security, and in many cases even changed the way we live. The radars of World War II, for example, led to microwave ovens and now self-driving cars. Satellite-based communications emerged from the space race of the 50s and 60s and has transformed the global economy and the way we live every day. So now let's turn to the future. Now, just keep in mind when you hear me talk a little bit about space or inventing self-healing computers, I am not trying to convince anyone to buy Raytheon's stuff. It's pretty good stuff, and if you're interested, we're always available, but I'm not trying to convince anybody of it. I'm trying to convey the need to shift our mindsets and drive security solutions that meet the complexities of convergence. DARPA recently created and sponsored a Cyber Grand Challenge. The challenge started with more than 100 teams made up of some of the top security researchers and ethical hackers in the world. We participated alongside experts from academia and exceptional security companies, all working to solve exactly the same problem: how a computer system might identify its own vulnerabilities and autonomously fix those defects, all while detecting and averting threats in real time and creating new proofs of vulnerabilities to be launched against other competitors. What this DARPA challenge showed us is that it is clearly possible for a computer system to automatically detect and repair its own flaws and to learn from what it sees in these attacks. This level of automation is an absolute prerequisite to fixing the problem. In another area of machine learning, we're creating capabilities for automated threat hunting. As I said before, the threat actors continue to evolve, the technology continues to evolve, and the user environment clearly continues to evolve. It is impossible for us, the good guys, to out-hire the adversaries. We just don't have that many people that are actually interested in reviewing computer logs on a daily basis. So we're going to need machines that automatically correlate threat information from as many sources as possible, learn from the human analysts, and integrate live environmental data streams to take actions informed by context. This is also another form of convergence. This kind of machine learning really does give us the edge to stay ahead of the threat environment. Let me just take a quick minute and reflect on space, or the space domain. Our dependence on space technology is growing and expanding in ways that were unimaginable a few decades ago. Space has become a congested and contested domain, which is why it's so important to cyber harden our space technologies. The GPS system has become a linchpin, not only for military missions, but for time-stamping across the globe, for time-stamping financial transactions and supporting all of our critical infrastructure sectors. Its impact on the economy is significant. That's why the GPS Next Generation Operational Control System, the ground system for the GPS satellites, is going to achieve the highest level of cyber hardening requirements, and it's not only for the DoD, but it's for the nation. There's no doubt that the American public is beginning to see the dangers of an unsecure cyber domain. Hackers associated with the Russian government have been officially accused of leaking protected data to infiltrate the U.S. electoral process. Cyber attacks attributed to North Korea were directed at Sony and were very publicly discussed. Attacks on Estonia, Georgia, and the Ukraine are just a few other examples of how nation-states are asserting their power using very advanced cyber capabilities. I'm not going to discuss what our Vice President said last weekend or what was talked about even during the third debate, but I think we're all well aware of it. Most of us understand that cyber warfare in some form is going to happen, and for many around the globe, it's already here. This type of warfare is going to be waged over commercial telecommunications networks. I'm going to repeat myself, just another form of convergence. Cyber warfare is an area of focus for the defense industrial base. This is not an area, I believe, this is not an area where the commercial cybersecurity industry can lead. Just as cyber is driving convergence in many areas of society, there's a concept in the military called the multi-domain battle, which is synergizing warfighting across all of the domains: air, land, sea, space, and cyber. This includes electronic warfare, signals intelligence, and cyber effects. The U.S. Army established about 4 years ago a new cyber center of excellence at Fort Gordon, Georgia, to manage these integrated capabilities. And at Raytheon, We've made multi-year investments to continue to advance our cyber capabilities. I said this earlier, but it's important. We're now taking these capabilities to the commercial markets and critical infrastructure providers. To protect our country from cyber threats, we must protect the ecosystem of connected, critically interdependent systems. We believe this is the right approach and the right model. It's a part of our healthcare system, our energy grid, our water supply, our space systems, and again, even our election systems. So over the past few minutes, we've talked about how the cyber domain is an incredible resource, and it is. And we all in this room are well aware of the significant challenges, from direct threats to our network systems, to a lack of security awareness by users, and a deep gap, I'm going to repeat this, a deep gap in the number of people trained and ready to meet the challenges. The cyber domain is core to both national and global security, and the risks facing it do demand our concentrated and immediate attention. So I mentioned a number of attacks throughout the discussion today, and they're clearly bothersome. But, let's not be naive. The threat is continuing to grow, and it is growing daily, and all you need to do is watch the nightly news. Each of us comes to this issue from a different vantage point, but each of us has a role to play. From talent development to security awareness to new strategies and, importantly, continued investments. It is our individual and collective responsibilities because, again, we in this room do understand the risks and the consequences of failure. So with that, thanks for listening today, and I appreciate your time.